Sand, desert, wind, water. The Pharaohs. Out of the cradle of civilization came men and women whom thousands worshipped as gods on earth. They led their people through an era that brought human creativity, mysticism, and intellect together to form one of the greatest cultures the world has ever seen. For 3,000 years, they ruled ancient Egypt and built great monuments to themselves and to their gods. The pyramids of Giza, the Great Sphinx, the temples of Abydos, Karnak, and Luxor. The Pharaohs. Through eyes carved in stone, they gaze out into the future. Their faces locked in expressions that convey a powerful legacy to all who look upon them. Their bodies wrapped in linen have traveled forward through time, and their spirits are reflected in countless sculptures, paintings, and hieroglyphs. Now the story of this ancient race of god-kings continues. Find out who this pharaoh really was and why he was thought to be a heretic. Learn the story of the pharaoh Cleopatra, who was also a seductress, and how she met her tragic end. Gaze upon the face of the pharaoh who built the most elaborate temples the world has ever seen. Walk among the men and women of Egypt who were the greatest pharaohs. Egypt, a land where desolation and endless desert give way to a narrow strip where water flows and life took hold. From these beginnings sprang the wonders of a flourishing Egyptian civilization that would last for more than 3,000 years. By the year 1386 BC, the Egyptian civilization was 2,000 years old and had been ruled by 86 pharaohs. It was in this year that a young and vigorous king by the name of Amenhotep III emerged to become ruler.
By the reign of the pharaoh Amenhotep III, the Egyptian empire was very well established. There was a tremendous inflow of income, especially for the royal house, and Egypt itself was very stable and prosperous. And so with Amenhotep III, you get the appearance of a really grandiose kind of material culture in Egypt with huge temples, huge royal figures.
His vast building projects were centered in the ancient city of Thebes. It was here that the pharaoh Amenhotep III embellished a magnificent temple dedicated to the god Amun, the Egyptian lord of creation. It signaled a peak of craftsmanship and artistic achievement for the Egyptian civilization. Its graceful columns and expansive court remain the pharaoh's masterpiece of elegance and design. On the west bank of the Nile River stand two imposing statues of Amenhotep III, known as the Colossi of Memnon. The 60-foot-high monuments are all that is left of the pharaoh's mortuary temple that once stood here. Standing beside him, dwarfed by his stature, is the image of Queen Ti, who was his wife and the mother of his son. From trading expeditions abroad and an abundant supply of gold from the mines of Nubia, Egypt under Amenhotep III enjoyed a time of wealth and great prosperity.
The Egyptians have the leisure to start getting involved in a lot of theological speculation, which leads to what the Egyptians considered a disaster.
The disaster came in 1353 BC and took the form of a strangely shaped man who some believe was a heretic. Amenhotep III had been grooming his oldest son for the throne when the young prince died. This left his younger brother, Amenhotep IV, to succeed their father. He had been studying religious matters, however, not affairs of state. As a result, his reign was a revolutionary departure from the long-entrenched traditions of Egyptian kingship. Scholars still struggle to understand this pharaoh. Was he a fanatic or a great reformer, a visionary or a madman? Whatever the answers, he was without question the strangest of all the pharaohs. For over 1,700 years, the Egypt of the pharaohs had worshipped many gods. Amenhotep IV wanted Egypt to follow only one god, the sun god called Aten. As if to complete the transformation of Egyptian religion, the pharaoh changed his name from Amenhotep to Akhenaten, which meant servant of the sun god Aten. It was the first time in history that mankind worshipped a single god. This radical change rocked Egypt to the very clay of its ancient foundations.
Akhenaten's reign was one of the great crisis points of Egyptian history. It was a period during which the old beliefs were overturned, the capital was moved, and the temples and cults were essentially shut down. This can't have been easy for the population.
The massive temple complex of Karnak at the ancient capital of Thebes remains the largest religious site in the world. It was here, in 1350 BC, that Akhenaten was crowned pharaoh in a traditional ceremony. But then tradition ended. Great changes were on the horizon. They began with the pharaoh Akhenaten's expansion and beautification of the Temple of the Sun at Karnak. Most notably, he added a new symbol to the temple. This curious disk was called the Aten. It was designed to symbolize his new god of the sun. In year 5 of his rule, Akhenaten proclaimed the Aten Egypt's one and only god.
Akhenaten has occasionally been called history's first monotheist, in that he did away, or at least no longer funded, the worship of all the other gods in favor of only one, the Aten, or the physical disk of the sun.
His choice for queen was also unconventional. Her name was Nefertiti. She came from a non-royal bloodline, but appeared to hold a very prominent position in her husband's reign. One of the most magnificent pieces of sculpture ever unearthed in Egypt is a limestone bust of Akhenaten's legendary queen. Nefertiti appears to have been an exquisite queen, but when we examine images of Akhenaten, we discover that his appearance was as bizarre as his ideas. Early on, many representations of Akhenaten caused a great deal of confusion among archaeologists. Because he was often portrayed with wide hips, a protruding belly, and breasts, he was sometimes mistaken for a woman who may have been masquerading as a man. It seems possible. Years earlier, Queen Hatshepsut was often portrayed as a male. She even went as far as to wear the false beard reserved for kings, perhaps to appear more like a pharaoh. Akhenaten's physique has sometimes been attributed to an illness called Froelich's syndrome, which causes the body to distribute fat in ways that are considered typically female.
One of the side effects of the disease is that you are sterile, and we do know that Akhenaten and Nefertiti had several daughters, and there is some speculation, obviously, that Tutankhamun was a son of his as well. So if that's the case, then the idea of this one type of disease probably is not likely.
But Akhenaten's mummy has never been found. All attempts to diagnose his abnormal appearance have been based solely on art and statues. Other scholarly opinions about Akhenaten's startling appearance look not to medicine for explanation, but to the symbolism tied to his new religion that was based on the Aten sun god. Akhenaten's new religion was a radical departure for Egypt, but so strong was his conviction that he was willing to defy and eliminate the powerful religious institutions which represented the beliefs of virtually the entire population. He shut down the temples of the god Amun and declared Thebes would no longer be the foremost city of Egypt. A new capital city dedicated solely to his religion would be built. The pharaoh called his new city Akhenaten, which meant the horizon of the sun god. At the center of the new capital was the great temple. It was there that the pharaoh Akhenaten cultivated his new religion, devoted to the adoration of the sun god he called Aten. Before Akhenaten's religious reformation, ordinary people worshipped outside the temples, while the king, priests, and the elite of society performed their rites inside mysterious secret chambers. Akhenaten changed all that. He wanted the people to worship along with their pharaoh, out in the open under the sun's life-giving rays. It is believed that 3 ceremonies a day were held at the great Aten temple. The first was at dawn, as the sun rose over the cliffs east of the city. A second ceremony was held at noon, when the sun was directly overhead. Then, at sunset, the devoted would recite a hymn to the sun, which Akhenaten himself had composed. It is not known how successful Akhenaten was in converting his subjects to belief in the Aten. It is possible his new religion was simply a ploy to strengthen his image as a pharaoh. By eliminating other gods, Akhenaten knew he would appear more like a god himself.
The king was removing the intermediaries, the clutter of all the intermediate priests, the very bulky and cumbersome pantheon with hundreds of different deities and so forth, with a simpler form of the religion. But it was mainly involved with the idea of the king creating a more direct support for the idea of him as a living divinity here on the earth.
Akhenaten did not conduct this worship alone. There is evidence that his queen Nefertiti led the sunset ceremony each day.
Nefertiti was a very important woman. We're not quite sure whether it was Akhenaten who granted her some of the importance that she had, or whether she just decided to take it. There are some scholars who felt all along that Nefertiti was behind the religious revolution even more than her husband.
Another powerful woman of this era was Akhenaten's mother. Her name was Queen T. She had migrated with her son to his new city to act as his regent. Because Akhenaten was absorbed with matters of religion, it appears Queen T may have been responsible for affairs of state. If so, there remains a puzzling archive of clay tablets that were sent to the pharaoh Akhenaten. They came from outposts of the Egyptian Empire in Syria. The tablets reported that the outposts were under attack and failing. These writings, known as the Amarna letters, pleaded for supplies to be sent and promised continued loyalty in exchange. It is likely earlier pharaohs would have responded with soldiers and strategy. In this case, however, it seems Queen T may have been the one who ignored these pleas for help.